I didn't know my life was about to split cleanly in two on that Tuesday evening in October. I have seen absurd behavior in corporate boardrooms for over a decade. I once watched a senior vice president nearly cry over a PowerPoint font. I've endured 4-hour debates about margins as if national security depended on them. I even saw a CFO eat salad with his bare hands during a stress spiral because he didn't have time for utensils. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what happened at exactly 8 p.m. Ethan walked through our front door humming, not distracted humming, not casual humming, radiant humming. He was wearing the silk robe I had bought him for our 5th wedding anniversary. The expensive one he always said felt too indulgent for everyday use. In his hand, like a trophy from a private victory parade, was my bottle of 2015 Cabernet Sauvignon. Let me explain something about that wine. That wasn't just alcohol. That bottle had been aging in our temperature-controlled wine fridge for 3 months at the exact right angle. I had saved it for the Riverside contract, a multi-million-dollar deal that would have elevated my position at Morrison & Associates to a different tier entirely. That bottle symbolized validation, triumph, everything I had worked for. And there was my husband of 6 years, sipping it like it was gas station Merlot, his lips stained burgundy, his eyes glowing with something that was not love. There is a look married women recognize instantly, and dread. It's that unmistakable after-something glow. Not gym sweat, not work stress. Post-intimacy radiance. Except Ethan hadn't been at the gym. No work, just that robe, that wine, and that smile. He floated into the living room where I sat with my laptop balanced on my knees, pretending to review a compliance spreadsheet that may as well have been written in hieroglyphics for all the attention I was giving it. Not the everyday one. Apparently tonight had been extraordinary. He sat beside me, close enough that I felt heat from his skin. He took another long sip of my Cabernet and leaned in. "Don't be dramatic, Claire," he whispered, breath heavy with wine and betrayal. "It was just one night with my boss, the woman I've fantasized about since our wedding. Just one night. Like he'd stayed late finishing reports. Like he'd grabbed drinks with colleagues. Like he hadn't detonated our marriage with a sentence. And then that detail, the woman I fantasized about since our wedding. Most people at least lie. They invent traffic delays, client emergencies, dead batteries. But Ethan delivered a full confession with the confidence of someone who believed he was untouchable. I am not the jealous type. I have never checked his phone, never demanded passwords, never interrogated him about female coworkers like some insecure teenager. I trusted adults to act like adults. Foolish, apparently. My jaw tightened, but my voice remained steady. I looked at the man I had woken up beside for 6 years, the man who had promised fidelity in front of our families. And I said one word. Okay. Calm as still water. Neutral as Switzerland. No yelling, no tears, no thrown glasses, just okay. His smile faltered immediately. "That's it?" he asked, confusion flickering behind his arrogance. I closed my laptop gently. "Yes," I said, "that's it." But my okay wasn't acceptance. It wasn't surrender. It was the starting signal. Because Ethan forgot something critical. I don't do drama. When life punches me in the face, I don't swing wildly. I document. I calculate. And I respond with precision. And that night, while he drank what remained of my celebration wine downstairs, believing he had won something, I began taking notes. I'm Claire Chen, 38 years old, Senior Compliance Integrity Auditor at Morrison & Associates. In simple terms, I'm the woman corporations hire when billions of dollars are about to change hands, and nobody wants surprises. I investigate executive conduct, financial records, undisclosed relationships, legal vulnerabilities, anything that could implode a merger after the ink dries. I don't guess. I verify. I don't speculate. I document. That personality trait didn't suddenly appear on a Tuesday night in October. It's who I've always been. I met Ethan 12 years ago at a charity networking event hosted at a rooftop bar in Riverside. He worked in strategic development for Torres Technologies. Polished, charismatic, MBA from Wharton, the kind of man who knew how to shake hands like he meant it. He made me laugh that night, not in a rehearsed way, in a disarming way. "You look like the only person here who actually reads contracts before signing them," he said, handing me a glass of sparkling water instead of champagne. "I do," I replied. He grinned. "Good. I need someone like that in my life." At the time, it felt romantic. Now, it feels ironic. We dated for 4 years before marrying. Ethan was ambitious but charming about it. He talked about building something meaningful, about partnership, about mutual respect. He proposed in Napa. Classic. Thoughtful. He chose the ring carefully. A simple platinum band with a clean solitaire diamond. Nothing flashy. He said, "You're already impressive. You don't need anything loud." I believed him. In the early years, we were balanced. I was rising through the compliance ranks. He was climbing corporate strategy ladders. We hosted dinner parties, traveled twice a year, invested conservatively. We looked, from the outside, like a stable, intelligent couple. But stability can hide fractures. Ethan liked admiration. He didn't demand it loudly, but he absorbed it like oxygen. Compliments from colleagues, attention from junior analysts, that subtle leaning in when women laughed a little too hard at his jokes. I noticed. Of course I noticed, but I trusted him, and I trusted us. His boss, Vanessa Morales, CEO of Torres Technologies, entered the picture 3 years ago. Early 40s, divorced, sharp, highly respected in tech media circles. Ethan talked about her constantly. She's brilliant. She sees my potential. She says I think like an executive. At first, I was proud. Later, I was wary. Family dinners began including subtle comments from his mother. "Vanessa seems very invested in Ethan's career," she once said, stirring her tea carefully. "That kind of mentorship can be intense." I brushed it off. I am not a paranoid wife. I do not police friendships. But over time, small shifts accumulated. Late-night strategy sessions. Weekend board preparation. Phone turned face down more often. Cologne applied before internal meetings. When I asked casually, he always had answers. "You're reading into things, Claire. She's demanding, not inappropriate. You know how this level works." And I did know. At that level, optics matter. Disclosure matters. Boundaries matter. I work in a world where undisclosed executive relationships can tank billion-dollar mergers, which is why, when Ethan leaned over our couch and confessed so casually, it wasn't just emotional betrayal, it was professional absurdity. Because what Ethan didn't know, what he couldn't possibly have known, was that Morrison & Associates had been hired to audit the Orion merger, a $4.2 billion acquisition, and Torres Technologies was at the center of it, which meant Vanessa Morales' executive conduct was already under review, which meant my husband had just confessed to sleeping with a CEO whose company I was auditing. The universe has a sense of humor, and that Tuesday night, it handed me leverage, wrapped in silk and Cabernet. Ethan thought he was untouchable. He thought he was confessing to a powerless wife. He forgot who he married. He married a woman whose job is identifying risk, and he had just declared himself one. When I look back now, the affair didn't start that Tuesday. It started in fragments, in glances, in timing, in tone. 3 months before Ethan's confession, the Orion merger file landed on my desk. Morrison & Associates had been retained to conduct full executive due diligence for the acquisition of Torres Technologies. Estimated value, $4.2 billion. My role wasn't decorative. I wasn't reviewing spreadsheets for formatting errors. I was lead compliance integrity auditor. My signature on that report determined whether the deal proceeded or collapsed. At the top of the executive file, Vanessa Morales, CEO, age 44, divorced. Public reputation, disciplined, visionary, ethical. And under her senior strategy team, Ethan Chen, my husband. At first, it felt mildly uncomfortable. I disclosed internally that my spouse worked for Torres. The firm evaluated it and determined no conflict, as long as I reported any material personal relationship affecting executive conduct. Standard firewall, my managing partner said calmly. You're a professional, Claire. I am. That's the irony. The same week I began reviewing Vanessa's executive background, Ethan began coming home later. Not dramatically late, just later. 7:45 instead of 6:30. Board prep. Investor calls. Vanessa wants revisions. Her name was suddenly constant in our house. She's under so much pressure. She trusts me. She says I'm the only one who thinks strategically. I would nod, smile, ask follow-up questions. I observe for a living, and I started noticing things. His phone would light up on the kitchen counter. Vanessa, late. Weekend texts. He angled the screen away instinctively. Confidential stuff, he'd say lightly. I let it go. Because trust, once established, makes you rationalize what you shouldn't. Then there were the clothes. New ties. Sharper tailoring. Cologne before internal reviews. One Friday night, he came home glowing, exactly like he did on Tuesday. Big win? I asked. Something like that, he replied. He kissed my cheek, but it felt distracted, like muscle memory. A week later, his mother called. I saw Ethan in a photo online, she said carefully, at some tech gala. He was standing very close to Vanessa. It was probably staged, I said. She paused. Claire, men don't stand that close accidentally. I laughed it off. But that night, I searched the image. There they were, on a red carpet, her hand lightly on his arm, not inappropriate, but intimate, in the way people comfortable with proximity stand. The seed of doubt took root. Still, I did not accuse him. I did not search his phone. I did not confront him dramatically. I watched. At work, as I reviewed Vanessa's financial disclosures, I began noticing minor inconsistencies, unusual calendar gaps, private dinners marked as strategy alignment, hotel charges not aligned with official travel itineraries. Nothing definitive, just patterns. And here is the dangerous thing about patterns. Once you see them, you cannot unsee them. The week before his confession, Ethan began behaving almost euphorically. He worked out more, smiled at his phone more, avoided eye contact when I mentioned Orion. One evening, I asked lightly, "You're not nervous about compliance digging into executive conduct?" He froze for half a second, then laughed. "You make it sound so ominous." "It is ominous," I replied calmly. "That's the point." He studied me then, as if assessing whether I knew something, but I didn't. Not yet. What I had was intuition. And intuition is not evidence. I need evidence. That Tuesday night, when he walked in humming, wearing the silk robe I bought him, carrying my Cabernet like a trophy, the pattern snapped into clarity. The glow. The arrogance. The confession. It was just one night with my boss. Just one night. The woman I had been auditing for 3 months. The woman whose executive integrity I was currently evaluating. He didn't just betray me. He detonated his own career in my living room. And the worst part? He thought I was powerless. He thought I was simply a wife. He forgot I am trained to trace threads. And he had just handed me one. There's a specific kind of silence that follows betrayal. It isn't loud. It doesn't echo. It presses against your ribs and slows your breathing until your body forgets how to inhale. That was the silence between Ethan's confession and my okay. He had expected rage. He had expected tears. He had expected furniture-shaking drama that would allow him to pivot into defensive justifications. Instead, I gave him stillness. He blinked at me, studying my face. "You're not upset?" he asked cautiously. "Oh, I'm upset," I said evenly. "I just don't perform it." His jaw tightened. The smugness faded slightly. "It wasn't emotional," he added quickly. "It was pressure, the merger stress. Vanessa and I were working late. It just happened." Nothing just happens in boardrooms. Nothing just happens in hotel suites. And certainly nothing just happens in the lives of executives under active due diligence. I stood up slowly, closing my laptop with a quiet click. Was it really just one night? I asked. He hesitated. That half-second pause told me everything. It doesn't matter, he said finally. It's over. Over. Such a small word for something that fractures foundations. He followed me into the kitchen. You're being weirdly calm, he said. It's kind of unsettling. Good, I replied. He exhaled sharply. Claire, I told you because I respect you. Respect. The audacity of that word almost made me laugh. You told me because you thought I couldn't do anything, I corrected softly. That's not fair. No, I said. Fair would have been fidelity. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing. It's complicated. Vanessa is your CEO, I finished. The CEO currently undergoing executive integrity review. He stopped walking. What? I held his gaze. Orion merger. Morrison and Associates is leading compliance due diligence. His face lost color. You're auditing Torres? I'm lead auditor. The air shifted. He stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. That's confidential, he whispered. Yes, I agreed. It is. His breathing quickened. You can't use this, he said quickly. That would be unethical. I tilted my head slightly. Use what? Our situation. I don't need to use anything, I replied calmly. You already created a material risk. He swallowed. Claire, did you disclose your relationship to HR? Silence. Did Vanessa disclose to the board? More silence. Then it's already an undisclosed executive-subordinate relationship during an active merger. His voice cracked. You wouldn't tank a $4.2 billion deal over this. I don't tank deals, I said. I report risk. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You're my wife. Yes, I said softly. And you're my case study. He flinched. The dynamic had shifted. This was no longer a husband confessing to a hurt wife. This was a corporate executive realizing he had slept inside a compliance nightmare. You can recuse yourself, he said quickly. Just step away. I can, I said. But recusal requires disclosure of conflict, which would still trigger investigation. His shoulders sagged. I didn't know, he whispered. That I mattered? I asked. That you were this involved. There it was. He had underestimated me, not just professionally, existentially. You knew exactly who I was when you married me, I said quietly. You just stopped paying attention. He looked suddenly small, vulnerable, panicked. Claire, he said, stepping closer. Please, we can fix this. Fix. As if infidelity were a cracked screen. I studied him carefully. The man I once loved deeply. My heart hurt. Not dramatically. Not explosively. But in a slow, controlled ache. You don't get to ask me to protect you from consequences you chose, I said. His voice sharpened. You're going to ruin my career. No, I replied. You did that. I turned and walked upstairs. Behind me, he stood in the kitchen, breathing hard, as the weight of professional exposure settled over him. That was the moment everything changed. Not when he confessed. Not when I said, okay. But when he realized the woman he betrayed had power. And that power came with documentation. Upstairs, I locked my office door. Behind the false panel in my cabinet, the one I installed 2 years ago under the pretense of cable management, sat my secondary laptop, encrypted, offline from our home network, dedicated to sensitive audit work. I opened it. The sterile white dashboard of the Orion file appeared. Executive Conduct Review. Vanessa Morales. I opened a new addendum. Material Undisclosed Relationship. Preliminary Assessment. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for one full breath. Then I began typing. Cold. Precise. Professional. No anger in the language. Just facts. Hotel receipts. Calendar discrepancies. Communication timestamps. Conflict of interest implications. Potential SEC disclosure violations. This was not revenge. Revenge is emotional. This was consequence. By midnight, the draft was complete. I encrypted it, backed it up, and shut the laptop. Downstairs, Ethan was asleep on the couch. The empty Cabernet bottle lay on the table. He had no idea the countdown had begun. And for the first time in my life, I understood something clearly. Silence is not weakness. It is space. Space to decide how precisely you want to respond. And I respond with accuracy. The next morning, I woke at 6:15 a.m. like I always do. Routine is powerful. It stabilizes the body when the heart feels unstable. I showered. I dressed in a navy sheath dress and low heels, the kind that say competent, not dramatic. I blow-dried my hair, applied minimal makeup. My hands were steady. Downstairs, the living room looked like the aftermath of poor judgment. The empty Cabernet bottle lay on the coffee table. A faint burgundy stain had dried into the cream rug. The television still hummed softly with an infomercial about some revolutionary kitchen mop. Ethan was asleep on the couch, still in that silk robe, hair messy, mouth slightly open, one arm dangling toward the floor. He looked ordinary. That's the cruelest part about betrayal. It's carried out by someone who still looks like the person you loved. For a moment, I just stood there. 6 years of marriage, vacations, holidays, quiet Sunday mornings, shared passwords, shared dreams. I waited for rage to surface. It didn't. What surfaced instead was clarity. I walked into the kitchen and started making pancakes from scratch. Flour, eggs, milk, butter. I whisked harder than necessary. Each turn of the wrist felt grounding. Control in a world that had tilted slightly off its axis. The smell of butter filled the kitchen. Ethan eventually stirred and shuffled in. He looked fragile now. "Morning," he said cautiously. "Morning," I replied, flipping a pancake with perfect timing. He watched me carefully, as if I were an unexploded device. "You okay?" he asked. I set a plate down in front of him. "I slept fine. That's not what I meant." "I know." He swallowed. "Claire, I didn't mean for this to explode." "You mean you didn't expect it to matter?" He looked down at the plate. "It was a mistake." I leaned against the counter, arms folded loosely. "Define mistake." He hesitated. "It wasn't planned. It was scheduled," I said evenly. "You had hotel receipts." His eyes widened. "You went through my—" "No," I interrupted. "I didn't have to." He went pale. For the first time, fear replaced defensiveness. "Are you going to report this?" he asked quietly. I considered the question. "I'm going to do my job," I said. "That's not an answer. It's the only one that matters." He pushed the plate away, appetite gone. "You'd destroy everything we built?" I tilted my head slightly. "Ethan, you destroyed something first." He stood up abruptly. "This is vindictive." "No," I said calmly. "Vindictive would be emotional. This is procedural." The difference seemed to unsettle him more than yelling would have. He followed me toward the hallway. "Are we getting divorced?" he asked, voice tight. There it was. The word neither of us had said yet. "I don't make decisions in chaos," I replied. "I gather information first." He ran a hand through his hair. "I ended it," he insisted. "Last night, after I told you." "Did she?" I asked. He froze. "I don't know." "Exactly." Silence stretched between us. "You're different today," he said finally. "I'm aware," I replied, because something had shifted inside me overnight. Not love. Not grief. Power. Not in a cruel way. In a stabilizing way. I realized I did not need to scream to be heard. I did not need to beg to be valued. And I did not need to collapse because someone else lacked integrity. At 8:30 a.m., I sat in my home office and drafted a confidential email to the Morrison Executive Review Committee. Subject line: Material Executive Conduct Disclosure. Orion Merger. I did not send it yet. Instead, I left it open, visible. Deliberately. I walked past Ethan on my way to the bathroom. "I'll be back in a few minutes," I said casually. I left the laptop unlocked. Open. Glowing. 3 minutes. Not 2. Not 5. 3 is enough for curiosity to override caution. but short enough to maintain plausible normalcy. I stood in the hallway and counted. I heard the soft shuffle of his steps, the faint creak of my office chair. Silence. The kind that means someone is holding their breath while reading something they should not see. At exactly 180 seconds, I flushed the toilet, turned on the sink, and walked back down the hall. Ethan was seated in the living room again, phone in hand, scrolling too deliberately, his jaw tight. "You read it," I said. He didn't look up. I smiled faintly. "Of course you don't." His composure cracked. "Claire, you can't send that." "It's not personal," I said. "It's required. It'll trigger board review, legal involvement, SEC oversight." "Yes, you're my wife. And you're a senior executive who engaged in an undisclosed relationship with his CEO during a merger." His voice dropped. "You're going to burn everything down." I looked at him steadily. "No, I'm documenting that it's already on fire." That afternoon, he began calling Vanessa repeatedly. "Voicemail." Again. "Voicemail." Panic spreads quickly when power dynamics reverse. By evening, he asked again. "Are you sure you want to do this?" I held his gaze. "I'm sure I won't lie to protect something built on deceit." That night, as he slept restlessly beside me, I stared at the ceiling. The pain was there. Quiet. Heavy. But beneath it was something stronger. Resolve. He thought confession would free him. Instead, it activated the part of me trained to identify risk and eliminate it. And now he understood. My calm wasn't forgiveness. It was preparation. I sent the email at 8:02 a.m. on Monday. No dramatic music. No shaking hands. Just a click. Material Executive Conduct Disclosure, Orion Merger. Attached. Preliminary Risk Addendum. Recommendation, immediate board notification and independent review. Within 7 minutes, my managing partner replied. "Claire, confirm conflict of interest and provide timeline of discovery." I confirmed. Objectively, factually, without adjectives. By 9:15 a.m., the Executive Review Committee scheduled an emergency call. By 10 a.m., the Orion merger entered temporary freeze status, pending investigation. I did not inform Ethan. I didn't need to. He found out at 10:27 a.m. His office door slammed so hard upstairs that a framed photo tilted on the hallway wall. He stormed down the stairs, face pale. "They froze the deal," he said, voice shaking. "The board got a compliance notice. They're reviewing Vanessa." I said nothing. "Did you?" "Yes," I answered calmly. He stared at me like he didn't recognize me. "You actually did it." I reported material risk. "You could have warned me. I gave you a chance to disclose." "That's not the same thing." "No," I said softly. "It's better." His hands were trembling now. "You've humiliated me. You humiliated yourself." He paced. "They're pulling calendar records, phone logs, HR disclosures." "Yes." "Vanessa's furious." "I imagine she is." He stopped abruptly. "You don't understand how high this goes." "I understand perfectly." That's what terrified him. Because I wasn't reacting emotionally. I was navigating structure. By noon, Torres Technologies board had engaged external counsel. By 2 p.m., Vanessa Morales' calendar access was temporarily suspended. By 4:30 p.m., the financing banks issued concern memos citing material governance risk. Ethan sat at our dining table, staring at his phone like it was a detonator. "They're talking about SEC exposure," he muttered. I poured tea. "Carefully. You didn't think sleeping with your CEO during due diligence had regulatory implications?" I asked quietly. His head snapped up. "I didn't think you'd weaponize it." "Integrity isn't a weapon," I said. "It's a standard." That night, his mother called. "Claire," she began carefully, "Ethan says you're escalating things." "I'm fulfilling professional obligation." "He's under immense pressure." "So was I replied evenly. There was silence on the line. "Marriage is about protecting each other," she said softly. "Yes," I agreed, "it is." She had no answer to that. The next morning, Ethan didn't go to work. He claimed internal review day. By mid-morning, Vanessa finally returned his call. I could hear her voice through the speaker, sharp and controlled. How did compliance find out? She demanded. You told me you handled disclosure, Ethan snapped. I did, strategically. Strategically? He repeated. Her voice dropped. Your wife works in compliance, doesn't she? He went quiet. Ethan. He didn't answer. Oh my God, she whispered. The line went silent. He lowered the phone slowly. She didn't know, he said weakly. About me? I asked from the kitchen doorway. He didn't look at me. She thought I was just married. There it was again. Underestimation. He stood abruptly. You've destroyed her career, too. No, I said calmly. She chose the risk. She'll lose everything. So will you. His anger finally cracked. You're enjoying this. I stepped closer. No, I said quietly. I'm surviving it. He looked at me then. Really looked. For the first time since his confession, I saw something raw in his eyes. Fear. Not of me emotionally, of consequence structurally. By Wednesday, the banks formally withdrew financing letters. The merger's valuation dropped overnight. Stock analysts began speculating about executive instability. By Thursday morning, Ethan received an internal memo. Administrative leave pending investigation. He sat on the couch reading it 3 times before speaking. They're pushing me out. They're protecting the company, I said. He laughed bitterly. You're cold. No, I replied softly. I'm steady. There is a difference. That evening, he tried one final angle. We can fix this privately, he said. You can amend the report. It's already under independent review. You have influence, not over facts. He stared at me. I underestimated you. Yes, I agreed. And now? Now you're learning. The house felt different by then, less like a marriage, more like an aftermath site. His phone buzzed constantly. Lawyers, colleagues, frantic texts from Vanessa. Mine remained silent. Because I had already said what needed to be said. By Friday, news outlets began circulating rumors of executive misconduct under review. Ethan stopped sleeping. He paced at night. He avoided mirrors. And somewhere inside him, I think he realized something that cut deeper than the investigation. I had not screamed. I had not begged. I had not chased. I had responded. And that made everything far more permanent. The escalation wasn't loud. It was procedural, and procedure is merciless. People assume the darkest moment in betrayal is the discovery. It isn't. The darkest moment comes after the machinery starts moving, when there's no more adrenaline, no more strategy, just the quiet weight of what's broken. By Saturday, the house felt hollow. Ethan hadn't shaved in 2 days. His phone barely rang anymore. Vanessa had stopped calling entirely. Her legal team had instructed no further personal communication. He sat at the dining table staring at nothing. I sat across from him with a cup of tea I hadn't touched. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, he said, very softly, I didn't think you'd choose your job over me. That sentence landed heavier than anything else he'd said all week. I lifted my eyes to his. I didn't choose my job, I replied. I chose integrity. He shook his head slowly. No, you chose power. That hurt. Because power was never what I wanted. Security was. Respect was. Partnership was. I chose not to protect a lie, I said. His voice cracked then. The first real crack. I've lost everything. I looked at him carefully, not as an auditor, as a wife. You lost trust before you lost your position. He dropped his face into his hands. For the first time since Tuesday, I felt something fracture inside me. Not rage, not triumph, grief. 6 years of shared life reduced to legal exposure and reputational damage. The house we chose together suddenly felt like a staged memory. That afternoon, I walked into our bedroom and opened my closet. My wedding dress box sat on the top shelf. I hadn't looked at it in years. I brought it down slowly. The lace still soft. The satin still pristine. I remembered the way Ethan's hands trembled slightly when he slid the ring onto my finger. I will never embarrass you, he had whispered at the altar. The memory made my chest tighten painfully. Downstairs, I heard him on the phone with his father. "I made a mistake," he was saying. "Claire went nuclear." I closed my eyes. Nuclear. As if truth were an explosion instead of a consequence. That evening, I sat alone in the backyard. The grass, freshly cut earlier in the week, looked almost too precise, controlled, managed, unlike my marriage. Ethan came outside after a while. He didn't sit next to me. He stood behind the patio chair. "I'm probably going to resign," he said quietly. I nodded. "They offered me the option before termination." Another nod. "You don't care, do you?" That one stung. I turned to him. "I care," I said softly. "I just won't collapse." He studied me like he was searching for the woman he thought he knew. "You're different now," he whispered. "I was always this way," I replied. "You just stopped looking." The wind moved gently through the yard. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said something that broke through the armor I'd built all week. "I didn't think you'd leave." I felt the air leave my lungs. "I haven't left," I said carefully. "But you have," he replied. And he was right. Emotionally, something had stepped back. Not out of cruelty, out of self-preservation. That night, he slept in the guest room. Not because I asked him to, because the space between us had become undeniable. At 2:14 a.m., I woke suddenly. For the first time since Tuesday, the strategy quieted, and the pain rushed in. I sat up in the dark, breathing carefully, feeling the full weight of it. The betrayal, the humiliation, the loss of the future I thought we were building. Tears came silently, not dramatic, not theatrical, just steady. I allowed them. Because strength without grief becomes stone, and I refuse to become stone. I whispered into the dark, not sure if I was speaking to him or to myself. How did we get here? No answer came. Only the sound of the house settling. The next morning, I made coffee for one. He stayed in the guest room. The silence between us wasn't hostile anymore. It was resigned. And in that resignation, I realized something sobering. Even if the investigation ended tomorrow, even if the merger magically recovered, even if his career survived, the version of us that existed before Tuesday was gone. And no compliance report can restore that. That realization hurt more than any legal consequence. Because consequences are measurable. Loss isn't. That was the lowest point. Not the board review. Not the frozen deal. Not the potential SEC exposure. The lowest point was understanding that I had done the right thing, and it still cost me everything. The turning point didn't arrive with fireworks. It came quietly, in a conference room on Monday morning. By then, Ethan had submitted his resignation letter. It was framed as personal reasons during internal review. Corporate language is gentle when it wants to be. Vanessa Morales had stepped aside pending investigation. The Orion merger was officially suspended. I sat across from the independent review counsel Morrison had appointed to avoid any appearance of bias. 2 attorneys, 1 forensic accountant, 1 external compliance observer. Neutral. Methodical. They weren't there because of me. They were there because facts had escalated beyond containment. "Miss Chen," one attorney said calmly, "we need to confirm timeline of knowledge." I provided it. Date of suspicion. Date of confession. Date of internal disclosure. Every answer aligned with documentation. The forensic accountant cleared his throat. "We've independently verified hotel charges, calendar discrepancies, and encrypted communication logs between Mr. Chen and Mrs. Morales." Independent. That word mattered. This wasn't my report alone anymore. It was corroborated. The attorney leaned forward slightly. "You understand this will likely trigger regulatory review." "I do." "You're comfortable with that outcome?" I paused. Not because I doubted the ethics, because I acknowledged the cost. "Yes," I said quietly. After the meeting, my managing partner walked beside me down the hallway. "You handled that professionally," he said. I handled it accurately. He stopped walking. "Claire, this couldn't have been easy." For the first time all week, someone spoke to me not as an auditor, but as a woman. "It wasn't," I admitted. He nodded slowly. "Integrity hurts sometimes." "Yes," I said, "it does." That afternoon, something unexpected happened. Vanessa's former executive assistant requested a confidential conversation. She had resigned 2 days earlier. "I've seen this pattern before," she said quietly across a small cafe table. "You weren't the first spouse." My pulse didn't spike. It steadied. She slid a folder across the table. Printed emails. Calendar blocks labeled vaguely. Expense anomalies predating Ethan. "This isn't personal," she said gently. "It's structural. She cultivates loyalty. It becomes blurred." I flipped through the pages slowly. Ethan hadn't been special. He had been accessible. The realization did something strange inside me. It removed the romantic narrative. This wasn't some epic forbidden connection. It was executive entitlement. Misuse of power. Predictable. Repetitive. Documented. "Why are you giving me this?" I asked. She held my gaze. "Because you were the only one who responded without screaming. That tells me you care about the right thing." I absorbed that quietly. For the first time since Tuesday, I felt something shift. Not anger. Not grief. Perspective. This was never about proving something to Ethan or punishing Vanessa. It was about maintaining standards. That evening, Ethan approached me cautiously in the kitchen. "I heard they verified everything," he said. "They did." He leaned against the counter. "I didn't know she'd done this before." "I believe you," I replied. He looked surprised. "You do?" "Yes." He exhaled slowly. "I feel stupid." "That's a start," I said softly. He studied me carefully. "You're not trying to destroy me, are you?" I met his eyes. "If I wanted destruction, I would have acted emotionally." He nodded slowly. "So what happens now?" There it was. The question beneath everything. I dried my hands carefully on a towel. "Now," I said, "we separate the marriage from the investigation." His face tightened. "You're leaving." It wasn't a question. I held his gaze. "Yes." The word didn't tremble. It didn't explode. It simply existed. He closed his eyes briefly. "I thought we'd survive this." "So did I." "But you're not angry anymore." "No," I said gently. "I'm clear. Clarity is colder than anger, but it's kinder than chaos. I'll move out this week," I added, "temporarily. We'll handle things legally and respectfully." He nodded. For once, he didn't argue, because the power dynamic had fully shifted. Not professionally, emotionally. I wasn't responding to him anymore. I was responding to myself. That night, as I packed a small suitcase, I paused by the wine fridge. The empty slot where the 2015 Cabernet had rested stared back at me. I didn't feel rage. I felt release. He had mistaken my silence for weakness. He had mistaken my calm for passivity. He had mistaken my profession for something abstract and harmless. He was wrong on all 3 counts. And now, for the first time since Tuesday, I understood something deeply. The turning point isn't when others fall. It's when you stop shrinking. I zipped the suitcase closed and walked out of the house without slamming the door. By the time I moved into the short-term corporate apartment downtown, the fallout was no longer private. It was public. Torres Technologies issued a formal statement. The Orion merger has been terminated following internal governance review. The company is committed to maintaining the highest ethical standards. Corporate language is elegant when it buries chaos. Vanessa Morales officially resigned to protect shareholder confidence. Ethan's resignation followed 48 hours later. Stock value dipped. Financial news outlets ran polite but pointed headlines about executive misconduct during active merger. None of them mentioned my name. But internally, everyone knew who had filed the report. At Morrison & Associates, no one treated me like a villain. They treated me like a professional, which, oddly enough, hurt less than pity would have. 3 weeks later, regulatory inquiry concluded no criminal charges would be filed. Only governance violations and disclosure failures. The damage was reputational. Not penal, but reputational damage at that level is lethal. Ethan called me one evening after the official termination announcement. His voice sounded smaller. "It's done," he said. "I know. They're replacing me with an interim strategy head." Silence. "I never thought I'd end like this," he added. "You didn't end," I said calmly. "You reset." He gave a faint, humorless laugh. "You talk like a consultant, even now. It's efficient. Another silence. I lost Vanessa too, he said quietly. I didn't respond. There was no us, he admitted. Once the review started, she cut contact. Legal advised her to. I leaned back against the apartment window, city lights flickering below. Did you expect loyalty? I asked gently. He didn't answer, because he knew. Power protects itself first, always. A week later, we met with Harold Freeman, our family attorney, to begin separation paperwork. He adjusted his glasses and looked between us. I'm glad this is civil, he said. It's procedural, I replied. Ethan glanced at me. You don't hate me, he said suddenly. I met his eyes. No. He seemed almost disappointed. Why not? Because hate requires attachment. I don't hate you, I said quietly, because I've already accepted what happened. He swallowed. I thought you'd fight. I did, I said, just not the way you expected. The division of assets was straightforward. No theatrics, no courtroom spectacle. The house would be sold. Savings split. Investments divided according to the prenup, which, ironically, Ethan had once insisted was unnecessary. I trust you, he had said back then. Trust is easy when untested. When the paperwork was finalized, Harold leaned back in his chair. You both handled this with restraint, he said. Restraint. That word felt appropriate. Not cold. Not ruthless. Measured. After the legal meeting, Ethan walked with me to the parking garage. He hesitated before speaking. I underestimated you, he said again. Yes. I thought you were steady. I am. But I thought steady meant soft. I looked at him carefully. Steady means anchored. He nodded slowly. I didn't think you'd actually choose integrity over us. I didn't choose over us, I said gently. You did when you broke it. That landed. And for the first time, he didn't argue. News cycles moved on quickly. Another corporate scandal replaced ours. Another headline buried the previous one. That's how public disgrace works. Loud, then forgotten. But private consequences linger longer. Ethan took a lower-profile consulting role 6 months later. Vanessa joined a private board in Europe after a year of quiet. Reputations never fully recover. They adapt. As for me, I was promoted. Not because of the scandal, but because my documentation had been airtight. The Orion file became a case study in compliance training. Anonymous. Clinical. Precise. One afternoon during an internal seminar, a junior associate asked me, how do you stay calm when conflicts become personal? I paused before answering. You separate emotion from action, I said. You feel fully, just not impulsively. After the session, I walked back to my office and closed the door. There are still moments, small ones, when I remember the early days of my marriage. The Napa proposal. The way Ethan used to reach for my hand absent-mindedly in grocery stores. Those memories don't stab anymore. They sit quietly, like artifacts from a life that existed and ended, honestly. Because here is the truth. I didn't win. He didn't lose. Integrity simply held. And when integrity holds, everything misaligned eventually falls away on its own. I never screamed. I never humiliated him publicly. I never weaponized emotion. I documented. And then I walked away. A year later, I opened a new bottle of Cabernet. Not the 2015. That one had served its purpose. This was a different vintage. I poured one glass for myself. No ceremony. No audience. Just quiet acknowledgement. Betrayal doesn't define you. Your response does. I learned something in that October collapse. Silence is not submission. Calm is not weakness. And integrity is not revenge. It is alignment. When someone underestimates you, you don't need to shout. You don't need to prove. You don't need to retaliate emotionally. You simply remain anchored in who you are and let consequences follow structure. Ethan once told me I was too serious, too composed, too measured. He mistook discipline for dullness. He mistook steadiness for invisibility. He was wrong. The most dangerous person in any crisis is not the loudest. It's the one who waits, documents, understands the system, and chooses integrity even when it hurts. That Tuesday night split my life in two, before and after. But the woman I am now, she isn't hardened. She isn't bitter. She's clearer, stronger, anchored. And when I think back to that moment on the couch, Ethan humming, holding my wine, confessing with a smile, I don't remember the betrayal first. I remember my answer. Okay. Because that was the moment I chose myself.